Lots of Browns news coming in as the season begins. The OTAs are here, and the draft, of course. The draft is creeping closer. So we're going to do a deep dive into some more Browns options that might be there at 54 and beyond. Sick Podcast with Andy McNamara starts right now.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast with Andy McNamara, the sickest Cleveland Browns podcast.
Chubb runs, he's to the 10, 15, he's to the 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50. There goes Chubb, he's to the 30, 20, 10, 5, touchdown, Shabba-lubba hub.
It's gonna be sick.
All right, everybody. Hello. Welcome to the Sick Podcast with Andy McNamara. NFL season's getting close, guys. It's getting close. You know how we know? Well, because OTA is voluntary. We saw on the Browns social media all over the place, players coming in, Deshaun Watson coming into town, everybody getting back in. But of course, there'll be a whole bunch of new faces coming in at the end of April. Not a first round face, but other draft picks that'll be coming in. So this season is going to be here before we know it. So we want to dive in. John Vogel's going to jump in a few moments. He is our draft expert here on the Sick Podcast Network and all over. He is as dialed in as anybody with the prospects. But some Browns house cleaning to get to first and some news and notes around the team. But first, make sure you're clicking subscribe, you're clicking notifications, you're leaving a comment, you're sharing on Twitter, X, at SickPodBrowns, at AndyMC81, Instagram and TikTok, at AndyMC Sports. We always like to hear from our great Browns fans. So some notes here I'm going to be pulling up. Nick Chubb's contract, we mentioned, was going to be restructured. It has been, but now the specifics have come out on what that looks like. So Chubb was due about a $15 million cap hit, $12.2 million of cash. That's been turned into, and remember, for this year, there was no guarantee money for Nick Chubb. That was how it was built out. There was no guarantee money. So with the injury and all that, now that $12.2 million has been turned into $2.275 million of guarantees. That's not great, but there are going to be incentives for him to earn up to and back to that $12.2 million. So there's a whole bunch of different incentives. I'm sure game time snaps, touchdowns, yards, all that stuff. But for Chubb, really, you have to look at it this way. Super intense comeback, rehab, everything. He's there. He does it right. The team loves him. The fan loves him. This is a special talent because if you just look at it business-wise, if you took the name off of it, Nick Chubb, you'd cut him and save $15 million on the cap. Actually, it'd be 11 mil. You'd have to, there'd be 4 that would count against it. But you'd save 11 mil. But this isn't a normal player. This is a serious injury, again, to that same knee. We know the ACL. We know all the different ligaments, the same knee he hurt at Georgia. But he's working back. He wants to be there for the start of the season, probably more likely closer to the middle. That's why the Browns got all those different running backs in the committee. Donta Foreman, Nyheim Hines brought him in. So for Chubb, that's where we're at. A little bit of guaranteed money, better than no money, and gives him even more motivation to work back. So that's done. Chubb is there. He'll keep grinding and hopefully get back on the field quick. Now, some interesting news, and quite frankly, I think some good news, is on the Browns side, Hollywood Higgins, Rashard Higgins, and Christian Kirksey, linebacker, longtime Browns during some lean years, have retired, and they are signing one-day contracts as Browns. We tweeted that out at SickPodBrowns on Twitter. So that's great too. That's great to see. That's nice to have there. We're gonna have some fun after some draft talk. I don't want to keep John waiting, but we're gonna look back at the draft classes since we're talking drafts of the 2014 draft where Christian Kirksey was drafted and 2016. And I'm sure some of the memories will be not so fond, but we're going to look back at their careers, and so great that they're going to retire as Cleveland Browns. So that was then. They'll probably bang the guitar at some point during the season, but we want to look to the now. Let's bring in John Vogel, our NFL draft expert here on the Sick Media Network. Like I said, as dialed in as anybody to the prospects, to the draft, and he's going to help us deep dive a little bit here. John, how are you?
I'm great, Andy. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. Great to have you back on. And here's the thing. All these other teams and shows on the Sick Media Network, they get to have fun with their first round pick. Ooh, the Adam Rank gets to talk about a first overall quarterback. Ain't that fun? Other teams get to talk around first round pick. I get 54th overall, John. Come on. Come on. I gotta get excited about 54, day 2.
There's some really good talent that's going to be there at 54.
Okay.
There's going to be some really decent talent that's going to be there in the 3rd round. So it's not a bad year to have your first pick there. You know what I'm saying?
Right. It is deep class of receivers, of offensive linemen, and really, yeah, scattered across the board. You can find different pieces. Browns will wait to day 2. If Andrew Berry doesn't trade out of the spot, let's say it's day 2. It's the Friday, I guess. And 54 comes up. The Browns stay there. Just overall, how this team is, they've kind of, I thought Andrew Berry did a great job, John, sort of picking up free agencies or trade like Jerry Jeudy so that there's not a position where you're like Buffalo, where it's like, okay, they have to take a wide receiver. They can be a little selective here, right?
There's a lot of flexibility that comes with, loading your roster with depth and getting guys that can impact, right away, especially like a guy like Jeudy that you're going to hope will help open up things for Amari Cooper, because that's the idea is, if you got a really good one wide receiver. Jerry has never really had a great number 1 receiver that he's played with, not since he's been, at the University of Alabama. And so, when you get past the whole, he's a Jag, drama with Steve Smith last year. He's just a guy, I think once you get past that, you can see that there's an opportunity for him to really open up things, especially when you got, Cedric Tillman's waiting in the wings and, Elijah Moore out of the slot, David Bell, if you want to get a little bit bigger out of the slot, so there's a lot of weapons there. And so a trade like that's great. But it is a good point that you make when you look across the roster, there's not a glaring need that just hits you going, this is where they need to go. So, typically when you're in that type of a situation, you're going to go to a depth pick and you're going to look at the offensive or defensive lines. And so depending on, who's on the board at 54, there should be absolutely some good talent there. That's where we're kind of sitting right now with, you're probably going to beef up the interior and
you can go to a whole bunch of different directions
or disrupt. Yeah. You want to either protect your quarterback or disrupt the other one, and that's kind of the name of the game in the NFL at this point.
Yeah. Before we get into this year's draft, you mentioned Cedric Tillman, and I'm so bullish on this guy, John, because I feel that last year at Tennessee, you got him in the 3rd round because of that ankle injury. If he was playing full out, that guy had 1st round talent or at least high 2nd. Didn't get used much. DPJ, Donovan Peoples-Jones, got traded partway through the year. Came in, played a little bit willing, blocker, aggressive, that 50-50. I just think if you give Cedric Tillman a chance, this guy has, I think, at least number 2 receiver potential there. Where are you at with Cedric Tillman? Really not doing much in his first pro year, but kind of going back to his rookie season.
Well, you got to also remember, I'm in Tennessee. I'm not.
That's right.
So Tillman's my guy.
That's your guy. Okay, talk to me.
We liked him. We liked Jalen Hyatt a lot too. That was a fun year with Hendon Hooker throwing the ball to those guys. But yeah, Tillman he's a timing and possession receiver. So he's a guy that has to rely on making catches. Through the finesse of his route running ability and getting to a spot consistently and creating that separation. Like, think of a 10-yard hitch, right? A curl type route where you run out there and you stop and turn, the ball should be there. That's a very tough route to run and build that consistency with your quarterback because, 10 yards is 10 yards and the quarterback has to throw to a spot. So you have to, as a wide receiver, have to be at that spot every single time with a guy trying to disrupt you. So he's physical. And he's got that kind of type of ability as well, where he can handle, contact and a DB trying to disrupt that and get off the timing. So, with Tillman, that's kind of his game. He's not going to be a guy that's going to blow off the top, and like Jalen did, like Hyatt did when he was there. That was what they used him for exclusively. But Tillman was more so just that consistent guy that, hey, if we need to catch on 3rd down and 8, and he needs to get 10 yards beyond, the line of scrimmage, we're going to throw it to him because that's our guy that we trust in those situations. So this is a deep wide receiver room. Obviously, I think, he's going to have to probably beat out Bell. He's going to have to beat out Bell to get playing time. Unless, Jerry Jeudy just ends up, dropping the bag, essentially, which if that happens, then, okay, well, Steve Smith was right. He's just a guy. But, that's kind of the reality of his situation, is that he's got a lot of guys in front of him that are going to play different roles than him. And so finding a spot for him really may come down to having an injury, down the road during the season.
Yeah, but being able to go get those 50-50 balls too. You mentioned the physicality. I'm picturing perimeter. I'm picturing just the willing blocker. We saw a couple times at the end of the year, John, where he just pancaked the dude, and I'm like, there you go. That you see someone like that. That's not a prima donna vibe. If you're a prima donna, you want to catch the pretty ball and go get a touchdown. You're not blocking, and that's what really stood out to me with Tillman. I'm like, that guy is going to earn himself some time. So I hope he does get an opportunity, because I think there's loads of talent. But saying that, you did mention, and we've gone through on the show, some of the wide receivers and how deep this is. And it really depends on what type of run happens in that first round and early of the second, right? Are there 6 quarterbacks that go? Is it the offensive line? If there's a type of receiver for this Browns team, you mentioned the possession, and Tillman doesn't blow the top off. Neither does Cooper. Judy's fast, but not necessarily a true like zippy. I'm kind of picturing that type of a speed guy. Is there a couple names to you that, whether it's 54, the Browns trade back, or some just something of a receiver? Because for me, with this Browns offense now that's being rejigged under Ken Dorsey here, John, because they're not going to be doing 2-3 tight ends anymore. You're going to need like 7 wide receivers on this team to mix and match. So is there a couple wide receivers that pop out to you in that second round range?
It depends on a couple of different things, but, because I've seen a lot of, hype, I guess you could call it, on Ladd McConkey, the wide receiver out of Georgia. Yep. That would have been a guy that I would have penciled at 54.
I like him.
Before the process started. Now we're not even sure if he really gets out of, the top 40 picks.
Yeah.
Because he's such an elite route runner. He's got some really great speed. Runs, plays a lot faster than he tested, and he tested well. So that would be a guy that I would kind of circle. But I think you do have some speed. It's just, how do you find ways to utilize it in Elijah Moore? Because, Moore ran a 4.35.
Yeah.
When he came out, Jalen Darden is another guy that can fly. He runs faster than he tested. He was a guy at North Texas that was a lot of fun to watch when he was in college. And that's right there in that small slot type Elijah Moore style. So he's probably been brought in to try to push Moore a little bit more. But speed, like pure speed, McConkey makes the most sense. If he's not on the board, it's hard to see one of those guys getting down that has that ability. Maybe a Troy Franklin. We've seen him mocked all over the board. If Franklin's there, he's a guy that puts the top over the defense. You just wish that he tracked the ball a little bit better and was a little more consistent with his hands. There's throws that Bo Nix hits him on the dot 50 yards down the field, and he sometimes looks like he's got bricks for hands and just kind of hit him and ball hits some dirt.
I don't like that. I don't like that. We had speed with Anthony Sport. Yeah, he had bricks for hands.
Franklin is one of those guys that very well maybe they're 54, and that's if he is, that's what it's going to be, is just the inconsistency with his hands. Because I know a lot of people really like him. I really like the route tree. I think I said something about that on Twitter where I mentioned where he had one of the best route trees I've seen a prospect run in the last 5 years.
Okay,
in terms of the advanced understanding of how he sets up routes, the complexity of them, the different options looks that he had, and just the sheer number of different routes from different positions he ran. It was a fantastic route tree. The thing is, the only thing with him is the hands and the deep ball tracking ability. He's got the speed to blow it off the top. Now you just need him to finish it at the end of the play.
That's concerning. I'm cooling on Troy Franklin. Let me throw a couple other names at you. I'm cooling them. How about Ricky Pearsall from Florida Gators? I got a 4.41 second 40, 6'1", 189. Looked pretty smooth in and out of cuts. Good route runner. I don't know with that speed if he'd be a speedy guy or a slot guy, to which I kind of have enough slot guys.
Yeah, you got a lot of guys.
I need an outside guy.
Yeah, Pearsall played in the slot and outside at Florida and at Arizona State where he was before that. He's one of these guys that's heralded too and may not be on the board. That's the kind of funny thing, is if this wide receiver run starts in the late first round, and I'm not talking about the top 3 guys, I'm talking about everybody after the top 3. If that starts in the late first round, it's going to run in through the beginning, middle of the second round.
Yeah.
And then by the time the Browns are picking at 54, they're going to be sitting there like, well, all the damn receivers are gone,
Yeah, and at that point, you probably take a player you have higher rated on defense or something, and maybe swing back in the third and get someone who you have graded out.
Yeah. Yeah, because you have to, right? Where at that point it's just like, hey, we feel really good about our roster. We started off with talking about that and the depth that the Browns have across the board. So at that point, if you don't have a receiver that you feel like you can add there in the second round, if that run starts too early, go with it. Go get somebody that fits your scheme, that you have a really good grade on, and continue to build that depth, because that's, if you look at playoff teams, there's always the key consistent factor to a playoff team is depth.
Yes.
The more positions that you have depth at, the better you're going to be throughout the year, and the more equipped you're going to be to deal with injury. Especially in an 18-week season, 17-game season, with games now beginning to travel across the world.
Sure.
That puts a lot of wear and tear on a body, and so it's very difficult to get anybody healthy through 17 games in 18 weeks. So when you get to the playoffs, it's all about depth. Now the other thing is, I think the biggest difference between, if you look at a playoff team compared to a Super Bowl team, you notice that the main factor that's different is that the Super Bowl team is doing something that nobody else has done before from a team building aspect.
Right.
And the other playoff teams didn't catch up in time. So this past couple of years, we've seen teams that utilize 22 or 12 personnel more than anybody else are the top 4 teams, playing in the super in the playoffs. Why is that? Because if you're playing with tight ends, quote unquote, that are more so wide receivers, it creates matchup problems. If you're playing with running backs that are quote unquote wide receivers, you're more matchup problems, and you can spread them across the field and get these matchups on. How do you if they come out with a guy that's an H-back, a fullback, a running back, and a couple of wide receivers and a tight end, then what do you do?
Right. From a
matchup standpoint, how do you match that? Especially if the H-back is really like a 6'3" tight end, and the fullback is really just like a guy that runs routes out of the backfield. So it creates these mismatch problems, and those teams are able to move to the next level. It's, Philadelphia won the Super Bowl in 2017. It was having a deep defensive line rotation,
right,
that helped them win, because that's what got pressure on Tom Brady most of the game.
Sure.
And nobody knew how to deal with it throughout the rest of the year. So that's kind of the common thread between the Super Bowl team and a playoff team is depth, and then it's doing something that you haven't done before. So I think if you're sitting there at 54, I say all that to make this point. If you're sitting there at 54 and you see an opportunity to try something that nobody's really tried from a team building aspect, whether that's taking that wide receiver that gives you the 6th, 7th guy, that gives you the flexibility to put anybody else on the field, or if that's something that you do defensively, you go do it. And I think that's what you're looking for if you're the Browns at this point.
Right. One more wide receiver question for you. Xavier Worthy. Lots of hype coming out of the combine, of course, broke the record for the dash and all that, cleats in the Hall of Fame. But now this week, I've heard some rumblings that this might, in some circles, be viewed as a bit of a negative. As someone said, "Oh, he's just another John Ross, the guy's record that he beat." Now he's slender. Yeah. He's 165, about 6 feet 6'1". Did that success at the combine do you think helped or hurt him? And where do you see Xavier Worthy possibly falling? Because, boy, you're talking about straight up speed. If people don't want to bite on him, I think his hands are decent. I'd take him at 54. I don't think he's going to be there, but I'd take him.
No, I don't think he's going to be anywhere near 54.
Damn.
If I had to guess, yeah, I know it sucks. If I had to guess, I think that Worthy is going to end up probably going 32 to the Chiefs.
Oh,
they're going to take a chance on him.
Yeah, it's
right.
A perfect fit
and
Chiefs. Yeah,
because people are concerned. I think a little bit with his hands. I thought he had good, strong hands. I thought the one thing that he did do is he struggled to catch outside of his frame consistently. And so he prefers that ball to be in his breadbasket to make the catch. And he's got 15 career drops, over 335 career targets, which is it's okay. It's not great, it's not good, but it's not bad. So it's not a terrible rate. Obviously, he's a deep ball guy. He's got that speed. He's not necessarily a one-trick pony. I think that he does have a little bit of route running ability to his game. Does struggle a little bit more with the timing concept. So you want to get this guy moving in space and try to scheme him open, which won't be a problem with, I think with 25 out of 32 teams are running right now. Like they don't mind scheming the guy open and getting him into space and just getting him the ball while he's there. I thought he reminded me more of Henry Ruggs. From an on-field aspect, obviously not the off-field stuff.
Yeah.
But that's kind of who he reminded me of. Is he's got that route running that shows enough as a route runner to be okay, and has that incredible speed that helps him. It takes that to the next level.
In conversation with John Vogel, NFL draft expert. A couple more for you here, John. So let's say we're at 54. The wide receivers has been a run, and not the guy you want. You can wait or whatever the case might be. So then we look at different possibilities. There's a couple real good linebackers that might be there. Now, the Browns aren't linebacker heavy and have not put a priority on that position group, but Andrew Berry did go up and pick JOK a couple years ago. So there's that. Is in that second round, we take wide receiver out of it. Is defense sort of that depth spot that could be there and fall and have some value in the second round? Is there anyone that kind of any group or player that kind of jumps out to you in that spot that there might be a bit of a bulk and you can get some value there at 54?
Yeah, I think you're going to look at the defensive line. That'd be the first place that you look. It also kind of depends. So every year you see a run on cover corners. So corners that aren't necessarily tacklers, but can cover people. And you see that run start usually in the third round or so, third, fourth round. And that might start a little bit early this year because there's not a lot of really great other corners, So corner might be a position that you look at getting a cover corner. But I think if you're looking, linebacker is one of those positions in this class that there's not a ton of talent there. There's not a lot of depth. And even the top guys in the class that you see mocked in the first round and stuff, they have their issues that people are not too keen about, so whether it be in medical, whether it be off-field type stuff. So there's not really like a linebacker that makes a lot of sense in this class that early. I think you'll see some guys go late that have an opportunity to be good players. But some of these guys, like there's some wild stuff that I've heard about from some of the top linebacker guys in this class. And you're just like, man, it's just, I don't know. I don't know about that. I don't know what teams think. Yeah, it's nuts, man. It's crazy. Wow. But I think on the defensive line, you'd look at the defensive tackle. So, where's Darius Robinson end up going? Where's Braden Fisk end up going? You could bulk up your interior a little bit. Sure. I think that wouldn't hurt you.
Schwartz loves that rotation. I know, right?
Right, yeah, but I think, Maurice Hurst, Shelby Harris, Dalvin Tomlinson, Siaki Ika, those are all good guys. But, you've got some aging going on there that you'd like to kind of address. And, how much longer is Tomlinson going to play? How much longer is Shelby Harris going to play? Even Maurice Hurst. I mean, these are all guys
hurt all the time.
Well, yeah, and I had football cards of him growing up. You know what I'm saying? Like they've been around for a while. You know,
right.
So um, anyways, I guess the point that I make is there should be a decent defensive tackle there. Whether that's Braden Fisk, whether that's a Darius Robinson, whether that's one of those big interior guys that are disruptors. I think that would be a good spot to look at 54. And if not even there, you got Myles Garrett. You went out and got Zadarius Smith to play on the other side. You got Alex Wright, Isaiah McGuire in that lineup as well. Like, is another pass rusher going to hurt you? And Disa Isaac, maybe out of Penn State, would make sense there. I don't think Chop Robinson falls that far, but Adisa Isaac's fun. He might be the fifth best edge rusher in this class. So there's talent to be found there. There is.
Yeah. There's so many options. Last two for you. Just overall, not Browns, but overall in this draft. Who is someone that you feel is getting talked up or lots of hype, and you're like, man, I'm not buying it. I'm not biting. We see it we see the extremes on each level each year. There's some guy who's like, this is the guy, and it's like, I don't know. Is there someone, probably a first rounder or something like that, that's like, let's relax a little bit on this guy?
So last year, it was Tyree Wilson out of Texas Tech that went 7th overall to the Raiders, where I was sitting there like, I don't know about this guy. And, he's a big, long bull rusher. And it was kind of like, I get the hype. You're looking at a guy that's got some crazy length that tested pretty well, but no production, essentially. So there's I don't want to say that I'm good at this because I don't like to be that way. But there's usually another, a couple of years ago, C.J. Henderson was the guy that I could not stand in the top 10.
Right.
That made no sense to me at all. And, he's on his 4th team now.
I guess, yeah.
I think the one guy that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, not at least the way that people are talking about him, is Talise Fuaga out of Oregon State. And the offensive tackle, he played right tackle for the Beavers. He's just more so of a guard to me. Like, he just doesn't scream tackle. I know people talk about the light feet. I know people are all enamored with, his downhill ability. That's all great, but I don't see a pass set out of this guy. I don't see him being able to get into, a traditional anchor and hold up. I don't see him having the speed, and lateral explosiveness to cover going to the outside, especially against a speed rusher. I don't think he's going to be able to handle it. And so you even watch when they played UCLA and he had to play Tulatu, they started having him attack downhill on his pass set. So like he was run blocking on pass plays to try to, not let Latu into the backfield because he couldn't handle him as a pass protector. So, that's what he's one of those guys that I kind of scratch my head. I see a lot of top 10s with him. I see definite top 15s. And he's a guy personally that I wouldn't want to touch till probably 2nd round. And I'm thinking guard. I'm thinking right guard with him.
Guard, not tackle.
Now, if he ends up, he could be a great right guard.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? Because he's got that run balling ability. I don't like him up in the 1st round. I don't like him top 10. I don't 15.
No,
but no, I'm not going to try to play him right tackle if I draft him either. He's going straight to right guard. Say, hey, I'm going to make your job a little bit easier for you. Just hold up right here,
just sit there for 10 years. You're going to be just fine. Final one for you, John.
Okay, pick up some Pro Bowls. Yeah,
exactly. Go relax. Now let's go the other side of player that maybe isn't being talked up enough or some unfair stuff or whatever. And you think, this guy's going to go at late in the 1st or something, but boy, he's got top talents. Or someone that's been either a little under the radar or not being talked about enough.
Well, here's the guy actually for the Browns at 54 that fits that. And it very well may get there. All right. Because I know that you've got at the tight end position. I know that's not sexy, but you've got, David Njoku.
Yeah. Jordan Akins.
Jordan Atkins is behind him, and I guess you've got an H-back that you're going to try to get in there in Giovanni Ricci.
Yeah. He's just
from Carolina, Western Michigan, I think, is where he came. I remember when he was in college.
Yeah.
So, there's maybe a spot open for a tight end too. And I think Cade Stover has a really good chance to be the best tight end in this class. He's out of Ohio State.
Yep.
He's a converted defensive end, moved to tight end when he got to college. And he's absolutely torn it up. So he's still kind of learning the position. He's still new to it. He's only been playing it. I think this was his third year playing tight end. Maybe even second. I can't remember off the top of my head. But this guy, he's a ferocious beast as a blocker. He gets downhill really well. He's a really solid route runner already. He's a good receiver. He was productive at Ohio State. Stover is probably one of my favorite guys in the class. I mean, and he fits the Cleveland, blue collar mentality too. Because I mean, this is a guy that was at Ohio State, right?
Yep.
Home state guy who comes from a farm, and he legit worked out a deal where he got paid in NIL tractors instead of money for his family farm. So
really,
like, this is it's a true story. Look it up.
Oh, way.
This guy's awesome, and so I think when we look back on this draft, 10 years from now, 5 years from now, we're going to sit there scratching our heads going, how did people not think Cade Stover was going to be that great? Like, how did he end up in the second or the third round? How is this guy not, a first round guy? Because he just has that it factor. And, my co-host on the Sick Pod, Justin Gamble, we did a tight ends episode back several months ago, breaking down the tight end position and what you kind of look for there. And he made a really good point where he said, hey, nobody grows up. Nobody's, a kid watching football going, I want to grow up and be a tight end. Nobody wants to do that. Cade Stover looks like he grew up wanting to play tight end.
Yeah. Mansfield, Ohio, 6'4", 247 measured in at the combine. And to your point, at first thought, Browns fans might be like, okay, we love that he's a Buckeye. That gives you brownie points right there. Love he's an Ohio guy. But we have David Njoku. However, there is Jordan Akins who's getting older and is just a bit of a piece. And Giovanni Ricci, he's a fullback, essentially. So to bring that in a spot where it's like, hey, this guy could be a playmaker and he's tough, I kind of like that. And that might be the highest graded a player that the Browns have on their board at 54. And you bring in a Buckeye. I think that'd be pretty sweet.
And you also have to remember the point I just made like 10 minutes ago. In the last 2 years, the top teams that have used 12 or 22 personnel the most are in the conference championship games. That's fact. Yeah. So you kind of need a second tight end now. You need one. You need one that can come in there and run block and run routes and create those mismatch opportunities. And Cade Stover, he's that guy.
Interesting. All right, John, we could go all day, man. You've been very generous with your time. Tell people where they can find, I know you got a draft guide out. Tell people where they can find all the info, see you, watch you, read you.
Yeah. So on X at Draft Vogel, best way to keep up with everything that I'm doing. And then on, right here on the Sick Podcast Draft Vogel, where we talk about how to scout, C.O. Picado style, share the wealth, share the knowledge, and kind of try to use the current examples of players to pass on that stuff. So keep up with everything draft there. Hopefully learn a thing or two, become a better scout, become better processing, information in front of you, and know who your team's going to go get. Hopefully that's the idea.
Let's see. Maybe for the Browns, it'll be Cade Stover. Who knows? Good stuff, buddy. Thank you.
It'd be fun.
Talk to you later.
Andy. We'll see you.
There he goes. John Vogel from the Sick Podcast. And like I said, one of the best NFL draft minds, always learn something, and a very interesting conversation when you chat with John. Cade Stover out of Ohio State, tight end at 54. What do you think, Browns fans? You like it? What if that's the pick? What if there's a run on receivers? Not really anyone that stands out. And Cade Stover sitting there. Do you like it? Let me know in the comments. Click subscribe, notifications on for the channel here on YouTube. Tweet me as well at AndyMC81, at SickPodBrowns on X, AndyMC Sports on Instagram and on TikTok as well. Interesting. And that's the thing. With the Browns at 54 and the rest of this draft, you don't know. You don't know what there's going to be a run on. You don't know who's going to be a surprise riser or faller. You kind of have to let it come to you. And again, at least Andrew Berry has positioned this team where if you don't get the position X, it's not the end of the world. I keep using the Buffalo example, which I think stupid trade timing wise, but maybe that's the only time they could get it when Stephon Diggs, because now everyone knows you got to get a receiver or you're in real trouble. That's just what it is. Andrew Berry can be cloaked and can go in a bunch of different situations. I wanted to bring this up before. At the top of the show, I said signing one-day contracts to retire Browns. Hollywood Higgins. Remember Hollywood Higgins, Rashard Higgins, and Christian Kirksey, two beloved Browns during some dark times. 1-15, 0-16, but a lot of fun too. Remember Christian Kirksey with the dog check that still yelled at the stadium today. I wanted to look back at we're talking draft. How was their draft class? What did it look like? So let's go back to Christian Kirksey, all the way back to 2014, Browns fans. Do you remember the 2014 draft? I think you do when I start naming the names. The Browns had 2 first-round picks. The first one was cornerback Justin Gilbert. Remember old Gilly? Justin Gilbert, who said he was a heavy sleeper. Absolute gong show bust at 8 overall. But as we know in that draft, there was 2. And at number 22 was the infamous, the useless Jonathan Manziel. Johnny Football at 22. I'm choking on my rage thinking about Johnny Manziel. Now, it wasn't all bad, that draft. You had the 2 first-round busts, but you did get at 35 Joel Bitonio. That's the Joel Bitonio draft. Got Joel Bitonio. He's been around since 2014. Can you believe it? Perennial Pro Bowler. After him in the 3rd round was Christian Kirksey, who was top 3 or 4 in the NFL in tackles for a few years. Last 3 years with the Browns was a team captain. Just a solid, steady guy. Great 3rd round pick. The other 3rd round pick, Terrence West. Remember running back Terrence West? He didn't really do much. And then Pierre Desir, the cornerback, kind of a CB, bit of a say. I like Pierre Desir. I liked him. He did okay for a little bit and then kind of fluffed off. Now, let's look at Rashard Higgins. Hollywood Higgins. 2016 draft. Okay? Let's take a look. We got... Let's see here. Oh, this was the wide receiver draft. I remember I was on the air actually for this NFL draft at TSN, and we were having a live NFL draft show. 15th overall, the Cleveland Browns select Corey Coleman, wide receiver. Remember Corey Coleman? His biggest claim to fame was during Hard Knocks. He had a shoe collection, then they cut him. Corey Coleman, bust. Then, 2nd round, defensive end, Emmanuel Ogbah. He's gone on to have a nice career. Was okay here, 32nd overall. He was okay. Then you had Carl Nassib, defensive end. Decent player. 3rd round pick. I think that's a decent player. Again, on Hard Knocks. Remember, he was given the financial advice. Played for the Raiders. Good, decent player. Then you had offensive lineman Sean Coleman. He did nothing. Oh, no. Cody Kessler. Remember 15 baby carrots, Cody Kessler? Oh, good. This is when the Browns were trying to outsmart everybody with how cerebral they were a quarterback. As ordinary a player as you could get. Cody Kessler, useless. Then you had Joe Schobert. Round 4, 99th overall. Schobert was a good player. Good linebacker. Here are the other wide receivers. And remember, we still haven't got to Hollywood Higgins yet. Round 4, Ricardo Lewis. 114th overall. Cut. Defensive back, Derek Kindred. He made a few plays, didn't he, Derek Kindred? 129th overall, 4th round pick. He was okay. Look at all the picks the Browns had. Oh, my, this is depressing me. All these picks, and most of them are useless. Jordan Payton. He got caught for juicing, I think. He gets steroids. He got caught. Couldn't catch a cold. Offensive lineman Spencer Drango, nothing. Then, in the 5th round, it was Hollywood Higgins. Set the, Colorado single-season receiving yards record. I think he was one of the top receivers in college football. And after him, 5th round Trey Caldwell and Scooby Wright. Remember old Scoobs? My gosh. Oh, then you got also Seth DeValve, tight end. Oh, boy, that was a It was a really crappy draft. Oh, my Lord. But Rashard Higgins was probably the best part of that draft. Charisma-wise, had the suitcase Hollywood roll out the red card. Baker Mayfield sliding in. He was Baker's favorite target. Browns have on their social media great highlight reel of him. I love Hollywood Higgins. What a character. Higgins, I hope they do something with him and Kirksey. Come out, smash the guitar before the game. Not good enough to be anywhere close to Ring of Honor type guys, but nice pieces during dark years for Browns fans. So Hollywood Higgins, Christian Kirksey, congratulations on very good careers, excellent careers, and for making us relive those absolutely terrible drafts. Oh my gosh. That's depressing. You know what? We're out of those days. It doesn't matter. We're out of those days. Okay? We're going to have a great draft. Andrew Berry's going to work his magic. We're going to figure it out. I'm still hoping a stud receiver falls to us. I really am. But like we talked with Lance Reisland last week of Cleveland.com as well, gave us some defensive options to go along. So between Lance, my analysis, going over John, I think we have a good feel, a good look at what some possibilities could be for the Browns. That Cade Stover, that's starting to stick with me a little bit. That's interesting on the tight end side. Next Tuesday, we'll get ready again for the draft. And first updates on the Browns OTAs a week in on the Browns players coming in. And now they can't, there's different phases in the offseason, right? Workout. So it's classroom. They can't put pads on or anything like that. That's in later weeks. But we'll get an update from Nick Paulus from ESPN Cleveland. Nick Paulus from Paul and Paulus will be coming in, and he'll be chatting with us to get us up to date on the current Brown stuff and talk a little draft as we creep closer to that. Thanks to John Vogel, the whole Sick Media team, and to all of you. We're getting closer to the draft, Browns fans. Make sure you're giving us a follow, leaving those notes. Who do you want the Browns to draft? And hey, we will see you next week on the Sick Podcast with Andy McNamara. Go Browns!
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Andy McNamara on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.